What makes you want to vote for Donald Trump?
The economy.
The economy. The economy's been better underneath Kamala Harris and Joe Biden.
Come on, man. Kamala don't have no plan. She don't even have a plan. Her plan is abortion.
Well,
she's done nothing for women. But she's done nothing for women, black or white, Chinese, whatever. If you're a woman, Kamala Harris has done nothing for you in 4 years.
But she comes
nothing.
But she comes from a middle-class family.
Yeah, whatever. That don't mean nothing. That means nothing.
And she's going to do price gouging.
She's not going to do nothing. She didn't do nothing for 3 years, but let all these illegal immigrants into our country.
All right, folks, it's been a little while since we've talked about polling data on this channel, but today I got to bring you some of the key updates because Kamala Harris had her nice little week of Democrat response bias, and now those things are starting to shift back into reality, surge back in Donald Trump's favor. And so we'll bring you some of that data here today, but I also want to talk about some of the key factors that are really leaning in Trump's favor for this election. And this is bigger than looking at one single poll, right? These are some of almost the intangible things that Trump has going for him that statistically speaking should not make it very easy for Kamala Harris or any Democrat to get to 270 votes in that situation. But first, we'll start here with the polling. So folks, if you enjoy the content, be sure to hit that like button down below and subscribe if you are new. Your subscription, trust me, goes a long way in making sure we can keep bringing you videos like this, so it's greatly appreciated. Be sure to like and subscribe. But that said, we'll start here out of the state of Pennsylvania, which is obviously, in many people's eyes, the single most important swing state in this election. And I got a breaking news update for you here today. Donald Trump has retaken the lead in the RCP average in Pennsylvania from Kamala Harris. You can see now he is in front by 0.2, which is certainly not a lot, but it does suggest momentum. And this is factoring in the fact that we have one Bloomberg poll this month that had Kamala Harris up by 5, which I think is safe to say is a little bit of an outlier. You know, regardless of what happens in PA, I don't think either candidate is exactly realistically winning in any scenario by 5 points. But even with that in mind, Donald Trump now has a slight lead over Kamala. And that is pretty big because for the past couple of weeks, Kamala Harris in RCP, the average at least, was up in Pennsylvania. Now that is shifted back in Donald Trump's favor. But moving on here to the state of Michigan, this is arguably a much bigger story. So if you look at the Michigan polling, it's almost commonly accepted at this point that it's looking like a state that Kamala Harris is going to win narrowly. Of those 3 key Rust Belt states, Michigan is like the bluest one, right? The hardest to crack as a Republican. But the Democrat Senate candidate in that state, Elissa Slotkin, recently this week was speaking at a private Zoom fundraiser where she actually suggested that Kamala Harris is underwater in the Democrats' internal polling out of Michigan. Take a listen.
I'm not feeling my best right now about where we are on Kamala Harris in a place like Michigan right now. We have her underwater in our polling.
Now, that is a pretty shocking thing to say because typically, you know, whatever the national polls say, usually campaigns run these internal polls that are more detailed. They're actually less biased because whether you're the Republican or the Democrat, you want to get an honest assessment of where the race really is. And so this has been the talk of the election for some time, which is Kamala Harris's internal polling reportedly has never been nearly as good as the public PR national polling has been for her. But there is, again, the Democrat Senate candidate not just saying, oh, it's going to be really close. She straight up is saying that they are underwater, or not her, but specifically Kamala Harris is underwater. Now, what could potentially be the motive there? Well, in fairness, it could be said that she is speaking at a fundraiser. And so it is not atypical for political candidates to do this, where they will try to essentially scare the donors into giving them more money by saying, look, we're really down, give us money, please, we're struggling, we're going to lose, right? But the difference here, and the reason I say the motive there might not be that, is it's one thing if you're Elissa Slotkin, the candidate here, to say, I am losing. Right, because she is trying to raise money for herself. This is her fundraiser. So it's one thing to say, guys, I'm losing. I need money. I need support. But to go out and say that Kamala Harris is losing, well, why exactly would you do that? Because if anything, now Democrat donors are going to be looking to donate to her and not to your campaign. So that really makes me beg the question, would she go out and say that about Kamala Harris? Not her. Again, a candidate saying they are losing to the fundraisers, that is perfectly normal. But to go out and say that Kamala Harris is losing, but she is not, odd thing to say if it is not true. And I will point out that just a couple of days ago, Atlas Intel, which was one of the most accurate pollsters in the 2020 election cycle, did put this out where they had Trump leading by 2.9 in Pennsylvania, 1.5 in Wisconsin, and check this out, 3.4 in the state of Michigan. Now, in total fairness, to me, this poll is a little bit all over the place because it has Trump only up 0.6 in Georgia, losing in North Carolina, but somehow winning in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. So I would personally say, as with any individual poll, kind of take it with a grain of salt, but hey, it is something that does suggest to confirm what Elissa Slotkin is saying, which is, hey, we're actually really struggling in a place like Michigan and in the greater Rust Belt. Last little piece of data I want to bring up here. So Telemundo put out their poll of registered voters here among Latino voters, and check this out. It has Kamala Harris leading Trump 54 to 40%. So that is a lead of 14 points among Hispanic voters. And why is that significant? Because that margin, folks, 14 points only over the Republican with Latinos, is not nearly enough for her to win. And where does that matter? Specifically in the southwestern states of Nevada and Arizona. In 2020, Joe Biden, based on the actual election results, won Hispanic voters in Arizona by an estimated margin of 65 to 75%. In the state of Nevada, he won them by an estimated 55 to 65%. And you can see here nationally. Okay, so this is factoring in Hispanics in places like California and New York. Kamala Harris only leading 14 points with that demographic group. That dooms her on arrival in a place like Arizona and Nevada.
What are the issues that move you towards Trump and move you and your community towards Donald Trump?
Well, mainly as the transgender and also the abortion right.
And you would say most of your community is choosing Donald Trump because of that?
Yes. Yes.
The 4 years he was in office, we were doing good, absolutely good. You know, Kamala, she's already in office and ain't done. And, you know, I mean, there was more work too.
So with all of this in mind, my estimation is that this election actually, at least on paper, and we'll get to that in a second, but on paper looks very favorable to Trump for these very reasons. Not just because of polling, oh, it's swinging back and forth. No, but specifically because of certain demographic trends that do not favor Kamala Harris. And I don't think anything I'm about to say here exactly sounds all that crazy. So first of all, since we just talked about them, let's discuss that Latino Hispanic vote. And if Kamala Harris is significantly down from what Joe Biden had with Hispanic voters in 2020, which again is not a crazy concept whatsoever, Hispanics have been slowly, gradually moving away from Democrats for some time now, then that essentially guarantees Trump victory in the states of Nevada and Arizona. Now shifting to the white working class factor, everyone wants to talk about the polls in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, but ultimately it comes down to this. In 2020, all three of those states were incredibly close, and people will remember that, and they have some things to say about it, but it is what it is. Ultimately, the final margin was razor thin, and a big thing that Joe Biden had going for him was the Scranton Joe facade. It was the fact that he could decently appeal to white working class voters, at least enough to stop the bleeding. Well, as Elissa Slotkin kind of hinted at in that Zoom call fundraiser, Kamala Harris has none, absolutely none of that appeal, and if she drops off just a couple of points with white working class voters in the Midwest, which I do not think is necessarily a crazy thing to say. Again, we're talking about things that are tangible. We can see they're very realistic, right? That would give Pennsylvania to Trump, very likely gives Wisconsin and maybe even Michigan to Trump, right? And that entire calculation is simply assuming two things to be true, which again, I don't think sound crazy, which is first of all, white working class voters drop off from what Biden had in 2020 and Hispanic voters drop off from what Biden had in 2020. That already puts Trump on a very clean path to 270. And in order to somehow counterbalance that, Kamala would have to, I don't know, maybe run up black turnout even higher than it was in 2020, which I don't think is necessarily possible because it was like almost 100% in 2020, or to maybe get suburban women to come out even more against Trump than they did in 2020. But again, I compare these election cycles, right? Back in 2020, you had BLM, you had COVID, you had all this stuff. The national environment really was not that favorable to Trump. And of course, we had a very high turnout election because of public interest in what was going on. Now in 2024, it at least seems to me you are very unlikely as the Democrats to achieve those things. And so we're just looking at these two factors and saying, statistically speaking, Donald Trump should have the support he needs, or I'd argue does have the support he needs to win this election. And so what's the counter argument? What is, in my opinion, the only way that Republicans, that Donald Trump loses on November 5th? And for me, it all comes down to turnout. It really is that simple, right? I genuinely do believe in my heart of hearts, Trump has the widespread popular support already necessary to win the election. And I just explained to you why. The only reason Kamala Harris might win is if Trump voters do not turn out to actually go to the ballot and vote in high enough numbers. And of course, people might say, oh, but what about 2020? What about the funny business? I said what I said. Again, high turnout. If Trump voters show up in high enough margins, I genuinely believe we have the support necessary to win this election because they can only do so much on the funny business front. So this is all to say that when I see Kamala Harris struggling so badly with white working class voters, with union workers, and with Hispanics, we have the numbers we need to win this election. It is looking very optimistic. So with that said, the only thing I can say from there is don't get complacent. Make a plan to vote. Make sure you show up to vote. Vote early if you have to, or heck, I might even encourage it because who knows, maybe on election day you get busy or you have a personal emergency or you can't get to the polls. You know, just make sure you get your ballot in there. And with that said, ladies and gentlemen, let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section down below. What is your prediction for the 2024 presidential election? Be sure to leave a like on this video. Again, subscribe to the channel if you are new. And until next time, God bless and peace.